The snow was falling gently when Ned Stark made his decision, the kind of snow that didn't just touch the ground, but touched fate. Jon Arryn was dead, and King Robert wanted Ned in King's Landing. But that day, instead of packing Arya's things for the journey south, Ned turned to her and said something she never expected. "You're coming home with me to Winterfell." Arya blinked, confused. "Not to the capital." "No," he said quietly, brushing her wild hair from her face. "You're not meant for cages, Arya. King's Landing will only try to change you. You'll be safer in the north." At first, Arya was angry. She wanted to see the capital, to ride in carriages, maybe even learn swordplay from the southern knights. But there was something different in her father's eyes that day, like he already knew the capital would swallow him whole. So they rode north together, leaving Sansa behind to live her dream of becoming a queen. The King's Road was quiet, but Arya asked many questions about war, about honor, about the stories of the old kings of winter. Ned, though tired, always answered. The quiet time between father and daughter was something neither of them had known. They needed, but it started healing wounds they didn't know were there. When they reached Winterfell, it was as if the old stones breathed with relief. The Stark girl had returned. Ghosts of the old kings might have whispered her name. Back in King's Landing, things started going wrong, just like Ned feared. Whispers of secrets, of bastards with brown hair, and the Queen's lies began to surface. Sansa wrote letters that sounded more like a stranger than a sister. Arya sat with her father at night, reading them by candlelight. The wolves in Winterfell howled louder each night, as if they too could sense the coming storm. One evening, Maester Luwin brought urgent news. Ned had been charged with treason. The Lannisters were rising, and King Robert was dead. Arya didn't cry. She stood in front of the fire, fists clenched. "If you go back, they'll kill you." "I must," Ned said softly, looking at her. "For honor." "No," Arya said, voice sharp like steel. "This time, let's fight for survival." That was the first moment Ned Stark saw who Arya truly was. Not just a girl who played with swords, but a wolf who understood what it meant to survive in a world full of lions. And for the first time in many years, Ned hesitated before doing what honor demanded, because this time he wasn't just a lord, he was a father, and his daughter was finally watching. That night, Winterfell felt colder than usual, even with the fires burning high in the great hall. Arya couldn't sleep. She kept pacing back and forth, her boots making soft thuds against the stone floor. She had always thought her father was the strongest man in the world, not just with swords but in heart. But now she saw something else in him. Doubt. Ned Stark was sitting alone, a goblet of untouched wine in front of him. His face was hard to read, not fear. No, Ned Stark didn't fear death, but something deeper. Guilt? Or was it the heavy weight of a man being torn apart by two roads, one paved by honor and the other by survival? Arya walked up to him and sat down without asking. She looked at him straight in the eyes. "You're not going to King's Landing," she said. He sighed, finally speaking. "I must. If I stay here while they accuse me of treason, it's war." Arya's voice shook. "They don't care about truth down there. You taught me that the world isn't fair. You said wolves don't kneel to lions, so why are you planning to kneel now?" Ned looked at her, surprised by the fire in her tone. The little girl who once chased cats through the castle was gone. This was a Stark of the North sitting in front of him. "I gave my word to Robert. I promised I would help protect his children." Arya snapped. "His children, or the Queen's bastards?" Silence. Ned looked down. She knew. Maybe she didn't understand all the politics and bloodlines, but she was smart. She had read the letters from Sansa. She had seen the look on her father's face every time someone mentioned Joffrey. "They'll kill you," Arya said again, softly this time. Ned looked at her with tired eyes. Maybe that's the price I have to pay for my mistakes. Arya's jaw clenched. Then let me make one of my own. Train me. Teach me how to fight. Not like the southern ladies with sewing needles. Real fighting. Ned frowned. Arya, or do you want to send me to a sept with Sansa next? She spat. That hit him. He chuckled, just a small one, and then rubbed his face like a man who hadn't slept in days. You're too much like your Aunt Lyanna, he muttered. Arya straightened her back, and she didn't bow to lions either. The next morning, Winterfell changed. Ned Stark didn't pack his things for the capital. Instead, he sent 2 riders south, one to Castle Black with a message for Jon Snow, and another to the Eyrie, where Catelyn had taken Tyrion Lannister prisoner. He sent no letter to King's Landing. That silence said everything. Whispers spread through the castle like wildfire. Lord Stark's defying the crown. They'll send soldiers. They'll send fire and gold. But in the north, gold meant little. Loyalty and blood meant everything. And Arya Stark, now with a wooden sword in hand, began her lessons in the courtyard. Ser Rodrik taught her the basics, but even he was surprised at how fast she moved, how hungry she was to learn. Every swing, every block, every fall, Arya took it like a promise. But while she trained, ravens flew. One landed on Maester Luwin's tower, a black shadow carrying dark news. Sansa was being held in the Red Keep. Ned had been declared a traitor. The crown demanded the head of House Stark present himself in chains, or the girl would suffer. The great hall fell into silence when the letter was read aloud. Arya's face went pale, her hands curled into fists. She's just a girl, she whispered. She's a hostage now, Robb said, his voice shaking with anger. They'll use her against us. Ned stood slowly from his chair. His heart was bleeding inside, but his voice was calm. We must not break, he said. Not now. Arya stood up too. We go south. We take her back. Robb looked at her, surprised. You want war? No, she said. I want my sister. There it was. The fire again. The wolf's fire. But Ned Stark didn't answer right away. He walked toward the window and looked at the snow-covered courtyard. The choice before him wasn't just about war. It was about legacy. About whether the Stark name would fall on its knees or rise and howl in the face of lions. He turned around. If we march as the North, but we do not start war because they took a girl. We start war because they think we are weak. Arya raised her wooden sword. Then let's show them we're not. The sound of steel echoed across Winterfell. Robb Stark stood at the training yard with his sword in hand, striking the post over and over. Each swing was harder than the last, his breath sharp, eyes filled with anger. Arya watched him from the shadow of the keep. Her own hands were blistered from hours of training, but her pain was quiet, held deep inside like a secret blade. She wasn't just a girl anymore. She was a Stark, and a Stark doesn't run from fear. She learns to fight it. Inside the Great Hall, Ned sat with the bannermen of the North, the Karstarks, the Umbers, the Glovers, lords who had fought with him in Robert's rebellion, men with long memories and cold blood. They've taken your daughter hostage, Great Jon Umber roared, slamming his fist on the table. And they dare send threats to the North? I say we ride south and bring them fire. Some of the men cheered, their faces hot with rage. Others hesitated. War with the crown was no small thing. Ned raised a hand, silencing the room. His voice was quiet, but firm. We are not children playing with swords, he said. If we march, we must be ready to pay in blood. Not just soldiers, sons, brothers, fathers. The room fell still. That was the truth, cold and sharp. Then Ned looked to the side and saw Arya standing at the edge of the hall, her grey eyes watching. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. He knew what she wanted. He also knew what it would cost her. That night, Ned sat by the fire in his solar. Arya walked in without knocking. She was wearing thick leather boots and a grey tunic, her hair tied back like a warrior's. You were listening, he said, not surprised. "I was," she answered, "and I still think we should fight." Ned gave her a tired smile. "You sound more like your brother every day." Arya sat down across from him. "Rob's angry." "I'm not, I'm just done waiting for people to hurt us." For a long moment her father said nothing. Then he leaned forward. "I once thought honor was a sword sharp enough to protect us all, but now I see the world doesn't care about honor. It only respects strength." Arya nodded. "So what will we do?" Ned took a deep breath. "We call the banners." The next morning, the ravens flew. One by one, the houses of the north received the summons. Sigils were raised. The sun burst. Of House Karstark, the roaring bear of House Mormont, the mailed fist of House Glover. The Stark wolf was no longer silent. It was awake. Robb began gathering men. Thousands. Arya trained harder than ever. Her wooden sword was replaced with a real one, made of castle-forged steel, though smaller in size. Jon Snow had sent it from Castle Black with a message. "Tell her to be careful where she points it." The world bleeds easily these days. Arya kept the blade by her side, day and night, but while Winterfell prepared for war, the enemy was not still. A raven came from the south. The Lannisters had moved. Tywin Lannister was marching toward River Run. Catelyn's father was under siege. Sansa was still a prisoner in the Red Keep. And rumors spread, dark whispers that Ned Stark had been seen with ravens of his own, sending messages to Stannis Baratheon. The Game of Thrones had begun, and every player was making moves. Ned sat at the Godswood one evening, under the weirwood tree. Arya came and sat beside him. The red leaves fell around them like soft blood. "Are you scared?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said. "Every man should be before a war. But fear is not the enemy. It's the warning bell." Arya looked down at her hands. They were calloused now, no longer soft. "If something happens to you," she started. "It won't," he interrupted. "But if it does, I won't be a lady, father. I can't sit in a tower." Ned looked at her, pride and sorrow mixing in his heart. "You were never meant to be a lady, Arya. You were meant to survive." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "But surviving doesn't mean forgetting who you are." Arya blinked, feeling the warmth of his touch. It felt like a shield. Suddenly a horn sounded from the walls. One blast, then another, then silence. Robb ran into the Godswood, breathless. "Riders," he said, "from the south. Lannister banners. They ride under a white flag." Ned stood up, heart heavy. "Then it begins." Arya followed them to the gates, where two golden-cloaked messengers waited. One of them held a scroll sealed in red wax, the royal seal. The letter was read in the great hall. "Lord Eddard Stark, you have been charged with treason. If you do not present yourself in King's Landing within 14 days, your daughter Sansa will be executed by the will of King Joffrey." Baratheon, a hush fell. The fire crackled. Arya's sword was already in her hand. "They'll kill her anyway," she said. Ned looked at his daughter, and this time he agreed. "We ride before the moon turns," he said. "For Sansa, for the North, and for every lie that brought us here." The North had remembered, and now the wolves were coming. Winterfell became a storm. Men arrived by the hundreds. Blacksmiths worked day and night, shaping swords, sharpening axes. Women made bandages, boiled water, cooked for the armies. Boys who had never seen real blood were handed spears and told to hold the line when the time came, and in the middle of it all stood Arya Stark. She watched as the banners were raised, the direwolf of House Stark flying high beside the sigils of the North. She saw Robb put on his armor for the first time, and she didn't see her brother. She saw a commander. And she saw her father standing tall at the gate, his cloak blowing in the cold wind, calm and silent like a mountain before a storm. But in Arya's heart there was fire. Sansa was going to die. That's what the letter said. 14 days. She counted them, one by one. On the third day they marched. 15,000 Northerners left Winterfell. Wolves in human form, hungry and proud. Arya rode near her father, not with the lords or soldiers. Her sword at her side, Needle, the name she'd given it long ago. It used to be a joke. Now it felt like a part of her body. She didn't feel like a child anymore. At night, she sat by the fires and listened. Stories from men who'd fought at the Trident. Whispers of Lannister tricks. Fear in their voices, not of battle but of betrayal. The South played dirty. And Arya was starting to understand that survival didn't always mean fighting with honor. Sometimes it meant fighting like a ghost in the dark. Ned noticed it too. She no longer asked for bedtime stories. She asked where to stab a man so he wouldn't scream. On the 6th day of the march, scouts returned. The Lannisters were near the twins, guarding the river crossing. Walder Frey held the bridge, an old man with too many children and no loyalty to anyone but himself. Robb wanted to ride straight there and take it by force. "We don't have time to kneel," he said. "Sansa is running out of days," but Ned held him back. "We must be smarter than them," he said. "If we fight everyone, we lose everything." Arya stepped forward. "Let me go." Robb looked at her like she'd gone mad. "You're not going to the twins. I can get inside," she said. "No one's watching for a girl. Let me see what Lord Frey is really planning. Maybe he'll let us pass, maybe not. But I'll find out," Ned frowned. "Arya, spying is not a game. It's not spying," she said. "It's survival." And for the first time, he didn't say no. That night, Arya left with 2 men, Jory Cassell and a small scout from House Mormont. They wore farmers' clothes, and Arya pulled her hair under a cap. At the edge of the river, they split up. Arya slipped into the camp of the Freys like a shadow. She was small, fast, quiet. No one questioned a servant girl carrying water. No one looked twice at someone scrubbing floors. And no one thought to ask the dirty little girl polishing the silver cups what she was listening to. What she heard made her blood run cold. Lord Walder Frey was old, yes, but not blind. He knew Robb needed the bridge, and he planned to trade it, not for gold, but for power. "He marries one of my daughters," Lord Walder croaked, "or he swims." His sons laughed. "The pretty wolf prince with one of our trolls." "He'll never agree." "Then we feed him to the fish," Lord Walder spat. Arya slipped away before they could say more. She rode back hard through the cold night and reached the camp by dawn. "They want a marriage," she told her father, shivering. "Or they'll betray us." Robb's face was red with fury. "I won't be sold like a horse." Ned didn't answer. He sat still for a long moment, then he said, "Send word. Tell him we agree." Robb turned, shocked. "Father." Ned stood. "We're not marrying anyone today. We're crossing a bridge. We can break promises later. But we can't bring your sister back if we're still stuck behind a river." Arya watched as the message was sent. She didn't like it, but she understood. The game was dirty, and they were learning how to play. The next day, the Stark army crossed the twins peacefully. The Freys welcomed them with fake smiles. Robb didn't speak a word during the crossing. And Arya kept her hand on her sword the whole time. Once across, there was no turning back. The South was open now, the road to King's Landing, and death was walking behind them. On the 12th day, they reached the Red Fork. And there, scouts returned again, pale, shaking. The Lannister army. "They're waiting for us." "How many?" Ned asked. "Too many." Arya's mouth went dry. War wasn't a word anymore. It was real. It was men with swords and arrows and fire. It was screaming. It was blood on snow, but she wasn't afraid. She was ready. "Do we fight?" Robb asked. Ned looked at Arya, at his son, at the men who followed him without question. Then he said, "We fight for Sansa, for the North, and for every lie they buried in gold." And that night, beneath the stars, the wolves prepared to meet the lions. The morning of the battle came cold and grey. The sky hung heavy with clouds, and the ground was soft from rain. Horses snorted in the mist. Soldiers whispered prayers. Steel was sharpened, armor strapped. Fires burned low, and Arya Stark stood in the middle of it all, her sword tied to her hip, her heart pounding like a war drum. She had never seen an army like this. Not just banners and knights, but blacksmiths, hunters, farmers with spears. Wolves of the North, hungry for justice. And above them all, her brother Robb, no longer just the son of Ned Stark, but now the young wolf, the commander of the North's fury, but the Lannisters were not fools. Across the Red Fork, their banners flew like red fire, the golden lions snarling from every tent. Tywin Lannister was there, with 20,000 men, twice the number Robb had. And worse, they had the high ground. "We can't charge them head-on," Robb said, standing over the map with his father. "We'd be slaughtered," Ned nodded. "We split." Arya was standing behind them, quiet, listening like always. "We divide the army?" Robb asked, uncertain. "Yes," Ned said. "You take the majority. Draw Tywin's attention. Make him believe you're the main attack. I'll ride west with a smaller force and move through the woods to flank." Robb looked up, his face pale. "If I fail—" "You won't," Ned said. Arya stepped forward. "What about me?" Ned looked at her for a long moment. "You stay with me." Arya's chest tightened. "But I can fight." "You will," he said. "But not in the open. We fight our own way." Robb left at nightfall, riding hard with 12,000 men. Torches lit the sky as they moved east. Tywin's scouts would see it just as planned, but Ned and Arya, with 3,000 silent men, took the forest path. No banners, no drums, just shadows moving through trees, and Arya felt it in her bones, the tension, the fear. She wasn't just a Stark anymore. She was something else now. Half girl, half wolf, all fire. They reached the edge of the Lannister camp by dawn. From behind the trees, Arya could see them, gold armor shining, tents spread like a sea of red silk. She saw guards yawning, knights laughing. Your campfires still burning low. "They think the battle is miles away," one of the scouts whispered. Ned raised his hand, then dropped it. The North attacked like a beast in the dark. Arrows flew first, dozens, then hundreds. Screams echoed through the camp. Men fell still, half asleep. Horses bolted. Tents burst into flame. Arya rode with the flank, her sword drawn. She'd never killed anyone before, but that changed fast. A Lannister guard rushed her, sword high. She ducked under his swing and drove needle into his thigh, then again into his stomach. He collapsed, gasping. Her hands shook. Her heart didn't. All around her, the camp exploded into chaos. Ned was in the front, cutting down anyone in his path, his sword wet with blood. Northern men shouted the name Stark like a war cry, but Tywin wasn't in the camp. That was the first mistake. By the time they realized it, it was too late. A horn blew behind them. Hundreds of Lannister knights poured from the western woods, not caught off guard, not surprised, waiting. It was a trap. Arya turned in time to see the second wave crash into their rear line. Northern soldiers screamed. Horses flipped. "Men were cut down like wheat. Fall back!" Someone shouted, but there was nowhere to run. Arya tried to reach her father, but the crowd was thick, blades clashing, bodies everywhere. A man grabbed her arm, a Lannister. She stabbed him in the neck before he could speak. She finally saw Ned fighting near a burning cart, surrounded. He was wounded, blood down his side, breath heavy, but he was still standing. Still swinging, she ran to him, cutting through the chaos, just as a knight in red lunged at his back. "Father!" she screamed. Ned turned, too slow, but Arya was faster. She drove her sword through the knight's ribs. He dropped. Ned looked at her, shock and pain in his eyes. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Blood dripping from his lip. "You told me to survive," she said. Voice shaking, they fought side by side after that, until the horns blew again, but this time they were northern from the east. Robb had returned. He hadn't attacked Tywin. He'd outsmarted him. The bulk of the Stark army hadn't been sent away. They'd circled around in the night and now charged straight into the flanks of the Lannister line. Tywin's face, from what Arya heard later, went white, and suddenly the battle turned. Lannisters began to fall back. Some fled, some dropped their swords. The North didn't stop. Wolves do not give mercy to lions who taste blood. Arya killed again. She didn't count how many. She didn't cry. By the end of the day, the field was silent. Thousands dead, bodies everywhere, smoke rising into the sky like a second sun. Arya stood over a fallen knight, blood on her face, her hair stuck to her cheek with sweat. Her hands were sore, her legs trembling, but she was alive. Rob found her in the middle of the field. "You fought," he said. Stunned, she didn't answer. Ned was behind him, limping but alive. He looked at his daughter and said nothing. He didn't need to. She had become a weapon now, but even weapons bleed. Later that night, Arya sat alone by a dying fire. She wiped the blood off her blade and stared at the stars. She wasn't scared, but she wasn't proud either. She was just changed and far away. In the Red Keep, Sansa Stark watched from a tower window, still a prisoner, unaware that the wolves were already at the gate. The fires still smoked on the battlefield when the Raven arrived. Rob read the message first, his face growing pale as his eyes scanned the words. He handed it to Ned, who said nothing for a long time. Arya stood nearby, watching them both. The silence between them was thick as snow. "What is it?" she asked. Ned looked up, his jaw tight. "Sansa's to be executed at sunset. Joffrey has announced it publicly." Arya felt the world tilt. Her heart dropped into her stomach. "What?" She begged for mercy. "On her knees," Rob said bitterly, "and that boy still wants her dead." Ned crumpled the paper and tossed it into the fire. The flames ate it slowly, but the words still burned in Arya's ears. They were too late. "We ride tonight," Ned said, standing. "Every rider, every sword. We don't wait for gates. We take the city or die outside it, but it'll take 2 days," Rob started. "Then we ride without sleep." They moved before sunset. The wounded were left behind with healers, and the fastest riders led the charge. Arya rode close to her father. Her hands gripped the reins so tight, her knuckles turned white. Her face was blank, but inside she was burning. They had come this far, killed, bled, burned, and they might still lose Sansa. That night, under cover of darkness, the Stark forces approached King's Landing. The city walls loomed like a black beast in the moonlight. Fires flickered in towers. Horns blew from the gates. They'd been seen, but they didn't stop. They charged the gate like a storm, shouting, "The North remembers!" Over and over, like thunder, Arya slipped off her horse near the walls, disappearing into the shadows before anyone could stop her. She didn't want to watch from behind this time. She was going in. She climbed like a spider, using broken bricks, ropes, old ledges. Her feet barely made a sound. She knew this city better than she should have. From all the stories, from everything her father used to tell them when they were small. Now those stories felt like lies. When she reached the top of the wall, she saw the city glowing below, golden torches, black towers, and the Red Keep shining like a serpent's jewel. Inside those walls, Sansa waited to die, and Arya was going to stop it. She slipped down the other side and vanished into the alleys. The people of the city were panicking. Some shouted of northern armies, others of rebellion. The gold cloaks were out in force, running through the streets, dragging men from their homes. Fires had already started in the poorer districts. The capital was rotting from the inside. Arya moved fast, her sword hidden under her cloak, face covered in soot. She was nobody, a shadow, a ghost of Winterfell. She reached the Red Keep just before dawn. The gates were shut. The guards doubled, but Arya knew the secret paths. Old tunnels, broken sewer grates, the forgotten cracks between the stones. She crawled through filth, choked on rats and dust, and came out inside the walls of the keep. She had no plan, just rage. She found the throne room first. Empty, cold. But the iron chair still stood tall in the dark. A monster made of blades. She stared at it for a moment, then moved on. In the corridors, she heard whispers, footsteps, screams, then Sansa's voice. It was faint, but clear. She followed it, heart racing. She found her in the tower, dressed in white, surrounded by Lannister guards. She was kneeling by the window, her hands bound. Her face was bruised, her eyes swollen from crying. But she was alive, and Arya's chest ached at the sight of her. She almost shouted, but then she saw Cersei. The queen stood nearby, calm and cruel, drinking wine like it was just another morning. She should be thankful, Cersei said to a guard. Better to die innocent than grow up stupid like her father. Arya gripped her sword so hard her palm bled. Then she stepped into the room. "Sansa," she said. Everyone turned. Cersei's face twisted. "What?" Arya didn't wait. She moved fast. The first guard lunged. She ducked and stabbed him low, slicing his leg. The second guard raised a sword. Arya threw a knife into his throat before he could swing. Cersei screamed. Arya grabbed the keys from the guard's belt and cut Sansa's ropes. Her sister fell into her arms, too shocked to speak. "Get up," Arya whispered. "We're not dying today." They ran down the stairs, past the guards who shouted but didn't chase. Chaos had already reached the keep. The army of the north had broken through the gates. Fire was spreading. Bells rang like war drums. The wolves were inside the city. Arya and Sansa slipped through the back halls, down to the lower levels. They reached the courtyard just as Ned and Robb stormed in, flanked by northern soldiers. Ned saw his daughters, both alive, and dropped his sword. He ran to them. Arya met him halfway. For the first time since she left Winterfell, she cried, not from fear, not from pain, but because they'd won, because they were still standing, because the North had remembered and the South was burning. Smoke choked the sky above King's Landing. The battle was over, but the city looked like it had bled from every stone. Buildings smoldered. Bodies lined the alleys. The scent of fire, blood, and rot twisted in the air. The common folk hid in their homes, too afraid to even pray. The gold cloaks had either surrendered or vanished, and the wolves ruled the capital. Ned Stark stood in the throne room again, for the first time since Robert dragged him south. The Iron Throne loomed above him, untouched, cold, sharp. It looked even more dangerous now, like it had been waiting for a body to sit and die on it. But Ned didn't look at the throne. He looked at his daughter. Arya stood beside Sansa, both girls bruised, tired, alive. The battle had changed them. Arya had changed more. She held her sword like it was a limb. Her eyes didn't flinch, and Ned saw it now. She was no longer his little girl. She was a Stark made of scars and silence. Robb walked in, armor scratched and dusty, sword still wet from war. He nodded to his father, then turned to Arya. "Word has spread," he said. "Lannister forces are retreating from the Riverlands. Tywin is regrouping. But King's Landing is ours, for now," Ned added. Sansa sat quietly, eyes low. She hadn't spoken much since Arya freed her. The days of pretending to be a southern lady had died the moment she saw Joffrey laugh at her pain. Arya hadn't let go of her since. "We need to restore order," Robb said. "The city's falling apart." "The city was already broken," Arya muttered. Ned heard it, and he didn't disagree. That evening, the Stark banners were hung from the towers. The people of King's Landing watched from windows and rooftops. Some cheered. Most stayed silent. They didn't care whose banners flew, only who would feed them, protect them, and not burn their homes. Ned addressed the crowd from the steps of the Red Keep. "I did not come to be king," he said. "I came for justice. My daughter was held under threat. The throne allowed it. The Lannisters committed crimes in the name of power. And now the North has answered." He paused. "But we do not rule by fear." Arya listened from the balcony above. The people below didn't cheer. They just watched. Wolves were still wolves, even if they wore the skin of justice. That night, Sansa finally spoke. He said he loved me," she whispered. "And then he said I'd die prettier than most." Arya stared at her sister. "I should have killed him." Sansa shook her head. "No, that would have made you like him." Arya looked away. "Maybe I already am." Later, she slipped away from the castle. She wore no sigil, no armor, just a blade and silence. She wandered through the city, passing beggars, soldiers, children picking through corpses. She saw how war didn't end with victory. It left behind ghosts. She reached the Sept of Baelor, where Joffrey once stood, and watched her father's head fall in another life. That platform still stood, blood-stained, and standing beneath it was Varys the Spider. He turned when she approached, his hands hidden in his sleeves. "Lady Stark," he said softly. "Or is it Lady Death now?" Arya didn't answer. He continued, "You've changed this city, perhaps the realm, but the game never ends. And you've made powerful enemies. They tried to kill my sister." "Yes," he said. But now you've declared war on more than just the Lannisters. The Tyrells are watching. Dawn stirs. And the crown is still missing a king. Arya stepped closer. We don't need a king. Everyone needs someone to blame when things go wrong, Varys said, smiling thinly. Or someone to worship. And if the wolves won't take the throne, the lions will come back for it. Arya gripped her sword. Let them. But even she didn't believe that was enough. The next day, Ned held a council, a true one. Not of liars and snakes, but of bannermen, northern lords, and trusted voices. The question was simple. Who would rule now? Robb said, let's take the throne. It's ours by right of conquest. Ned shook his head. We came for justice, not power. Arya watched them argue, one side wanting peace. The other knowing peace didn't last. Then a raven arrived. It bore the seal of Stannis Baratheon. Its message was blunt. The boy Joffrey is no true king. Robert had no true-born sons. I am the rightful heir. Bend the knee or be named traitors. Robb crushed the message. They're all mad. Ned stared at the parchment. Arya looked at her father. So what now? He didn't answer, because he didn't know. That night, Arya climbed to the top of the Red Keep and watched the stars. Sansa joined her, quiet, a blanket wrapped around her thin shoulders. I dreamed of this place, Sansa said. When I was a girl, I thought it would feel like a fairy tale. Arya nodded slowly. Fairy tales don't bleed. They sat in silence. Below, the city burned in small pockets. Somewhere people starved. Somewhere a lion was sharpening his claws. Arya knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. It was just the next move in the game. And next time, they might not be the ones holding the sword. The raven came at dawn. Its wings beat against the windows of the Red Keep, carrying a letter sealed in black wax. Ned Stark stood on the tower balcony, watching the city below. It was quiet now, too quiet. The kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from exhaustion, as if the city itself had grown tired of screaming. He broke the seal, read the words once, then again, and he felt the cold. Hand of fate on his shoulder once more. Tywin. Lannister was dead, murdered in the night, poisoned, in his tent, while regrouping near Harrenhal. And worse, Tyrion Lannister had vanished. No one had seen the imp since the fall of King's Landing. Whispers said he was heading east, others that he had gone north, wearing a cloak of black. But none could say for sure. That meant one thing: the Lannisters had lost their lion, but not their teeth, and someone, somewhere, would want revenge. Arya felt it first, before her father spoke, before the lords began gathering again. She felt it in her bones, in her blood, in the way the wind moved through the broken city. Someone's coming, she whispered to Sansa that morning. I can feel it. Sansa looked at her. Who? Arya's voice was flat. Everyone. By midday, ravens flooded the sky. From the Vale, from Dawn, from Old Town, from every corner of Westeros. The realm was not united in celebration. It was divided in fear. The North had taken King's Landing, but no crown had been claimed. No king had been named. And with no king, every lord saw himself as a ruler. Lord Renly declared himself heir. Stannis prepared his ships. The Tyrells raised banners in the Reach, and somewhere in the east. A dragon queen whispered about fire and blood. Winter was no longer the only thing coming. Chaos was already here. Robb slammed his fist on the table in the War Council. We should have taken the throne when we had the chance, he growled. We should have put you in the seat, father. Now they think we're weak. Ned shook his head, his voice calm but strained. If we sit on that throne, we become the very thing we marched against. Then what do we do? Wait for another war? Wait for them to knock on the gates again? Arya leaned forward, her eyes sharp. Let them knock. Robb looked at her, surprised, and then he nodded. A king in the north, someone whispered. Just like the old days, the words spread like fire. A king in the north, a king that owed nothing to the south. That night, the northern lords bent the knee, not to Robert's ghost, not to the Iron Throne, but to Robb Stark, the young wolf, lord of Winterfell, son of the north. And the next morning he left King's Landing. He didn't want the throne. He wanted his people safe. His kingdom strong. Arya didn't leave. Neither did Ned, and neither of them. knew they wouldn't get another peaceful sunrise. Again, it started with whispers of wildfire caches hidden deep below the city, Lannister loyalists hiding in the shadows, of a girl with silver hair crossing the narrow sea. With 3 dragons behind her, Arya trained daily, not with swords, but with silence. She patrolled the back streets. She moved like a shadow. She became part of the city's veins. Her father didn't stop her anymore. He couldn't. He saw the world as it was now, not as he once believed it should be. And then one night, as the moon burned high and white in the sky, the city exploded. Wildfire, green fire. It erupted from below, not at the Red Keep, but at the granaries, the food stores, the refugee camps. Someone wanted to starve the city, burn it from the inside. Arya ran through fire. She saved children from burning houses. She killed 2 cloaked men pouring oil on a gate. One of them had a Lannister ring on his hand. When she found her father again, his face was covered in ash. "They're trying to break us," she said, breathless. "No," he said. "They're trying to remind us that this throne doesn't belong to anyone." Arya didn't sleep that night. She sat on the steps of the Sept of Baelor, sword across her knees, and stared at the broken stars above. Sansa sat beside her. "They hate us," Arya whispered. "They fear us." Sansa said, "There's no difference anymore." 1 week later, Ned Stark called the last council of his life. He spoke not as a lord, not as a king, not even as a soldier. He spoke as a man who had lost more than he'd won. "We did not come to rule this city," he said. "And now we see why. It's cursed ground. It breaks every man who touches that throne." He looked at Arya and smiled faintly. "You saved me from it." The next day, he left King's Landing. He rode north, alone. Some say he went to the Wall. Others say he returned to the crypts of Winterfell to speak with ghosts. No one ever saw him again. Arya stayed behind, not to rule, to watch, to protect, to make sure the next monster who sat on that throne bled for every lie, because she wasn't a lady, she wasn't a knight, she was a wolf, and the North remembers always.